Bloodstained.
Yo, what's good everyone? I'm gonna have mostly gameplay in this video so that people can kind of see how the Switch version of the game looks. It seems to be a very hotly debated topic right now as of whether or not Bloodstained has a good port, a bad port, or somewhere in between. So I thought having Switch gameplay going on the entire time might, help convince you guys one way or the other while I talk about it. But this video is not just going to talk about whether or not I think the game is a good port or not. It's also going to talk about what I think of the game as a whole. Like, what do I think about Bloodstained Ritual of the Night? Little bit of backstory with this game for, clarity's sake, is that I did back this game. I backed it at like $120 something tier, something like that. And I've been playing it on both the Xbox One and the Nintendo Switch to kind of, compare and contrast and, kind of go from there. So that's kind of it. I've been kind of following the community a lot. I've had the pleasure of meeting several people involved with the game, including Koji Igarashi himself and Mana Ikeda, who did some of the art. So, it's basically just it's been a game that I've been involved with in some capacity over time. So in case my views are kind of askewed, or you might consider it to be biased in some way or another, due to that relationship I've had with the community, I felt like getting it out there to begin with. But ignoring all of that and getting right to it, what do I think about this game in general? Well, I started my first playthrough on the Xbox One, and then there was some kind of weird glitch that they mentioned that if you hadn't proceed past a certain point, the glitch would cause you to have to make a new save. So once I found out about that, I just completely stopped my save on the Xbox One and decided to just wait for the Nintendo Switch version. I didn't think it was worth continuing a save that I was just going to end up having to abandon anyways. So I just didn't, right? And since I knew I was going to get a Nintendo Switch version eventually, I just decided to wait to the Switch version. Overall, from what I've played of the game, I have not beaten the game yet, so I'm not going to say how I feel about it ending or the game overall, just, quick initial thoughts. I'm really enjoying this game. It's not the best Castlevania by any means. It's not even close, I think. The game definitely has its fair share of issues, especially on the Switch version. We'll get to that in a second. But the game has this sort of almost cheap vibe to it, and I assume that's kind of like a thing with, like, I don't know, like a Kickstarter game. Like, a lot of Kickstarter games that go for 3D models just have that feeling for me. So I guess Bloodstained kind of falls under that as well. But at the same time, the general idea of the game, like the level design and the map itself and the ideas behind it, the mechanics behind it, are all really sound and really well made. I think overall the game is actually really good. It's up, like, if I had to compare it with other Castlevania games, there are a good amount of Castlevania games that Bloodstained, in my opinion, as of now, already surpasses. Now, my favorite Castlevania game of all time is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and that's a very popular game for a lot of people. That's like a game that a ton of Castlevania fans would consider to be their #1 favorite. If not that game, probably Rondo of Blood or Castlevania 4. But my favorite has always been Symphony of the Night, and this game is supposed to be what is kind of like a spiritual successor to Symphony of the Night, but this game doesn't feel exactly like it. It kind of feels like a combination of two games. This one, Symphony of the Night, like I mentioned, or Aria of Sorrow, which was a game that you kind of like collected souls and whatnot. And Bloodstained, you pretty much do the same thing, except instead of souls, it's shards, and it's a cool mechanic. You kind of like, you just fight monsters, and randomly over time you just get powers for these different monsters, and that's what shards are. You collect the shards of these monsters, and then you gain some kind of ability that's based upon that monster. I think it's really cool. It's kind of just going back to Aria of Sorrow, and Aria of Sorrow was, in my opinion, one of the better Castlevania games. So I'm totally down for that. I actually really like that. Now, in terms of the Nintendo Switch version, I do want to touch on this because this has been, like I said, a very hotly debated topic as to whether or not the port to the Switch was good or bad, right? Now, some people are reporting that the game has crashed on them multiple times. There are frame rate dips and that kind of thing. And then there's also the general target, which was 720p at 30 frames per second, right? Now, I've played the game on both systems, and there is a clear and obvious graphical downgrade on the Switch that was immediately noticeable to me the second I started playing the Switch version, right? And as far as I was aware, there wasn't too many problems that I've had with the Nintendo Switch version. I kind of had to like replay it multiple times to try to recreate some of the glitches I've heard. A friend of mine, for instance, have told me that there was some kind of glitch that happened to them where some dialogue just kind of cut off at some point and the game just crashed from there. So I tried to recreate it, and I actually did manage to do that, which is actually pretty interesting to me. And I don't know if I recorded the gameplay of that, but if I have, then you'll see it on screen. But the game definitely does have its fair share of problems on the Switch. Any glitches and bugs that you may or may not find on the other versions of the game is kind of more pronounced on the Switch version, if for lack of a better term. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of people compare. I've unironically have seen people say that this game looks like it belongs on the PSP. What the hell are you playing that you think this is a PSP game? I don't understand that. It is and people saying unplayable. It is nowhere near unplayable. The port is not the best, because this is the same system that has Breath of the Wild, The Witcher 3, Doom, Wolfenstein, Mortal Kombat 11. And yes, those ports have their fair share of inconsistencies with the other versions and, you know, downgrades with the other versions, but they're still playable. Doom is perfectly playable. Wolfenstein is perfectly playable. Mortal Kombat 11 is perfectly playable. Mortal Kombat 11 crashed on me more often than Bloodstained did. Bloodstained, I managed to get one crash to happen, from one location that I've seen the Castlevania fan base kind of mention that they have gotten crashes on, and me playing it over and over managed to recreate it. But other than that, the game hasn't crashed on me at any situation. It hasn't crashed on me other than that one point in the game, and I had to constantly redo that part in order to get it to happen. So I don't know. When I just play the game like normal on my Switch, the worst that has happened is a couple of frame rate dips, and that's it. And the usual things you would expect from a Switch port of not AAA, but a third-party game. You know, the usual lower textures, lower resolution, that kind of thing. But playing portably, it looks great portably, because it's the same resolution as it would have been if you put it on your TV. And yeah, I don't know, I don't see it as an awful port. If anything, it's a port that shouldn't be as bad as it is, because you would expect a downgrade to this nature from something like Doom or something like Mortal Kombat 11, right? But Bloodstained, at least to me, is not a game that looks like it should have such a big graphical downgrade. So I think this is more in the line of some kind of optimization issues, because there was because I was a backer, so I was keeping track of the game's development over time. There was an update down the road that did say that they canceled the Wii U version and the Vita version, because obviously those versions are not here around to this day, and started development on a Switch version, which means the development on the Switch version hasn't been as far along as the other versions, because it wasn't there from the get-go. It was originally going to be a Wii U and Vita game. And keep in mind that this game was originally supposed to be on Vita. Imagine how the Vita version would have ran if that game was still in development and released. It was going to be nowhere near to the extent of the Switch version. Like, if you look at Resident Evil Revelations 2, I'm sorry, and look at the Vita version compared to the Switch version, there's a massive difference. So if you look at Bloodstained on the Switch and you compare that to your PC, your Xbox One, or your PlayStation 4, keep in mind those are home dedicated systems compared to a tablet, and you say, wow, Bloodstained looks like shit, to an extent, you'd be right. But at the same time, the game is perfectly playable and looks pretty fucking close. And by close, I mean it's the same game. Like, it's not so bad that it's indecipherable, and it's not like crashing constantly. At least it wasn't for me. I can't speak for everyone when it comes to the crashing issue. I did hear that some people had more frequent crashes. I know RGT85 mentioned that he has had multiple crashes. So I mean, I can't deny that. I just think that as of like speaking personally in my own terms, the game has not crashed anywhere near as much for me as it has other people. Maybe I'm just one of the lucky few that hasn't had it crash as often, but I don't know, it just hasn't for me. And the worst I've experienced so far has been just the occasional frame rate dips, and that's it. I do agree that the port could be better. Again, it's not like it's like The Witcher 3 or something. Like, the Switch is definitely capable of running this game and running it well. So I think and I could be wrong because I'm not exactly like a technical expert in any capacity, but I feel like the Switch version is the way it is because of the lack of development time on it, or maybe it's, I don't know, the team or whatever the case may be. I don't know. But I've seen some people in the Castlevania fandom say that, oh, the Switch is just that weak. And I don't see that. I don't. This is the same system, the same portable tablet that got The Witcher 3 on it. You'd have a hard time convincing me why The Witcher 3 running on it is less demanding overall than getting Bloodstained to run at maybe a higher resolution, or, you know, slightly better textures or something like that. Like, no, I don't see that. I'm sorry, I don't. But I do agree that the port is not as good as it should be for a 2.5D side-scrolling game. But I don't think it's anywhere near unplayable. I don't see how a portable version of the same game at 720p 30 frames per second is bad, because I know damn well that if the Vita version still existed, it would be running significantly worse. I guess I just don't see it. I really don't. I can't look, whether you like it or not, the Switch is a portable system that has a dock that does HDMI out and charges it, and that's basically it. That's all the dock is. So the way I look at it, I look at the Switch as a portable system that you can plug into your TV, and that's it. I know, like, they market it as a hybrid and whatnot, and because they market it as a hybrid, people kind of tend to compare it to the Xbox and PlayStation 4 and PC, and I get that, but that's my perspective on it. I don't see it that way. I see that as just marketing. I don't see that as the reality of the situation. The Switch is technically a hybrid and is technically also a home console, but when you look at it hardware-wise, it's just a mobile chipset. It's just a tablet. And for that reason, I'm still impressed with, like, a lot of games that make it on there, and I don't think Bloodstained is a situation of the Switch not being able to run it due to much better, bigger, and more demanding games showing up on the system. Again, I don't know. I could be totally wrong, and that's perfectly possible. But I guess just let me know what you guys think about this whole thing. Overall, I like Bloodstained. I actually really like it. I don't think it's one of the best Castlevania games ever made, but it's very enjoyable, and it definitely gives me the feeling of playing a Castlevania game, and a good one at that. So if I had to give this game a very off the top of my head kind of rating, I'd say like a 9 out of 10 is actually pretty fair. I'd say an 8 or 9. If you're wondering whether or not you should get the Switch version despite the issues, I would say that the good news is that the team of Bloodstained is in fact planning to update the game with you know, better, you know, just to make the port better overall, which is good news overall. For that reason, you can kind of just decide if it's what I think is the classic situation of, do you want graphics or do you want portability? Because definitely Switch is not going to be your place for the graphics. I don't think it's unplayable in the slightest. I think it's perfectly playable, but you're going to sacrifice graphics, obviously. But the Switch is also the only way you can play Bloodstained portably unless you're lugging around a laptop with you, which I don't see why people would do that. But yeah, that's kind of it. So just let me know in the comments down below how you guys feel about Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Do you think the Switch port is terrible? Have you been playing the Switch port? If so, do you think it's bad? And maybe just let me know what you think of the game overall. But that's basically it. So that's all I have for you guys. I'll see you guys in the next one.